It was a Thursday evening, the kind that usually wrapped around you like a warm blanket. I had just come home from a grueling day at work, my mind buzzing with thoughts of deadlines and meetings. The smell of my wife's famous lasagna wafted through the air, a familiar scent that often brought comfort. But that evening, as I stepped inside our modest home, I felt a strange foreboding creeping in, a sense that something was off. "Sarah," I called out, my voice echoing through the empty halls. There was no immediate response, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the clock, each tick amplifying my anxiety. I dropped my bag by the door and made my way to the kitchen, expecting to find her stirring a pot or setting the table. Instead, I found her phone lying on the counter, screen lit up, displaying a message that would shatter my world. It was a text from him, Jake, my childhood bully, the boy who had made my life hell during those formative years. My heart raced as I picked up the phone, a mixture of dread and disbelief washing over me. The message was simple, yet it felt like a punch to the gut. "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe." I stood frozen, the implications of that single line crashing over me like a tidal wave. Sarah, my wife of 5 years, was having an affair with the very person who once tormented me. Anger flared within me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a deep, gnawing hurt. How could she do this? How could she betray me with him of all people? The memories flooded back uninvited, Jake's taunts, the shove against lockers, the laughter of his friends as I walked away humiliated. My hands trembled as I set the phone back down, the weight of betrayal sinking in. I could almost hear the mocking laughter of my past echoing in my ears. I needed to confront her, to demand answers, but part of me hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if this was a misunderstanding? But deep down I knew. I could feel it in my bones. I paced the kitchen, my mind racing with thoughts of how to approach the situation. Would I confront her calmly, or would I let my emotions explode? The latter seemed more likely, considering the turmoil swirling inside me. But as I stood there wrestling with my thoughts, I heard the sound of the front door opening. "Hey, I'm home," Sarah called out, her voice bright, oblivious to the storm brewing in my heart. I turned to face her, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. She walked in, her hair slightly tousled, a hint of blush on her cheeks. She looked beautiful, and yet that beauty felt like a cruel joke. "Hi, honey," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Approached me, her arms outstretched for a hug, but I stepped back, the gesture feeling foreign. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "Did you text Jake today?" The question slipped out before I could stop myself. Her face shifted, confusion mixing with something else, guilt. "Jake, why would I text him?" She tried to laugh it off, but I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. "Because I found your phone," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside. "I saw the message." The color drained from her face, and for a moment silence enveloped us. It was as if time had stopped, the world outside fading away. Her eyes darted around the room, seeking an escape, an excuse, anything to deflect the truth that hung like a noose between us. "Listen, I can explain," she finally stammered, but the words felt hollow. I shook my head, my heart pounding in my chest. "No, you don't get to explain. You've betrayed me, Sarah, with him, of all people." Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. I had been the one betrayed, and the pain was raw, sharp enough to cut through any remnants of affection I had left. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, her voice breaking. It just did." Those words hit me like a slap across the face. It just did, as if our lives were some cosmic joke and my heart was the punchline. I felt rage boiling up within me, a mix of sorrow and fury that threatened to spill over. "Get out," I managed to say, my voice cold and detached. I couldn't look at her, not now. "Please, let's talk about this," she pleaded, but I was already shaking my head, desperate to escape the reality of my life crumbling around me. "Just go," I said, my voice firm. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed in the empty kitchen, leaving me alone with the ghosts of my past and the betrayal of my present. In that moment, I felt a shift within me, a dark resolve forming amidst the chaos. I couldn't let this go unpunished. They both needed to suffer for what they had done to me. As I stood there staring into the void, I realized that this was just the beginning. To understand the depth of my betrayal, you need to know the history that binds us, me, Sarah, and Jake. We all grew up in the same small town, a place where everyone knew everyone's business. I met Sarah in high school, a bright-eyed girl with a smile that could light up the darkest of days. We clicked instantly, bonding over shared interests and late-night conversations. She was my first love, the girl I dreamed about marrying one day. But then there was Jake. He was a year older, a local legend for all. The wrong reasons. The quintessential bully, he thrived on intimidation and fear. I was his favorite target, a scrawny kid who wore glasses and had a penchant for reading, easy prey for someone like him. I remember the days when I dreaded going to school, knowing I'd have to face him. The shove against lockers, the cruel jokes, the way he'd laugh with his friends as I walked away, red-faced and humiliated. Jake's reign of terror left scars far deeper than I cared to admit. I spent years trying to shake off the memories, to forget the feeling of powerlessness. But those years of torment shaped me, forging a resilience I didn't know I had. I eventually stood up to him, confronting him one afternoon after school. It was a turning point. I wasn't the same scared kid anymore. I learned to push back, to fight back. But while I found strength, Jake seemed to fade into the background of my life, a ghost from my past I hoped never to see again. Fast forward to college, where Sarah and I blossomed. We were inseparable, navigating the complexities of young adulthood together. I proposed to her after graduation, and she said yes without hesitation. We built a life filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams. I thought I had left the past behind, that the shadows of my childhood had no place in my present, but they were lurking, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. When I learned of Sarah's betrayal, the past came rushing back, intertwining with my present in a way I couldn't have anticipated. I felt like that helpless kid again, desperate and angry. How could she choose him? Was I not enough? I had fought so hard to build a life with her, to create a future free from the shadows of our pasts, and yet here I was, faced with the very monster I thought I had defeated. The emotional turmoil was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out, but I had to think clearly. I needed to understand the dynamics at play. What was it about Jake that drew her in? Was it nostalgia for the rebellious thrill of youth? Or was it something deeper, something I couldn't comprehend? As I sat in the living room, the silence of the house pressing down on me, I realized I needed to gather more information. I couldn't act on impulse, I had to be strategic. I thought back to the times Sarah had mentioned Jake casually, how she had never seemed to harbor any ill will toward him. She spoke of him as if he were just a boy from school, someone who had faded into the background. But now I saw the truth in a different light. Jake had re-entered her life, and I needed to know how. I reached for my laptop and began to dig. Social media was a goldmine of information, a digital diary of events and interactions. I combed through their posts, searching for signs of their affair. I found nothing at first, just the mundane updates of life, but then I stumbled upon a photo, Jake and Sarah together, laughing, arms around each other, a post from a few weeks ago. My heart sank as I clicked on it, the comments flooding in with friends praising their apparent friendship. But beneath the surface, I could feel the tension building. This wasn't just a reunion of old friends. It was a bridge back to a dark past, a connection that should have never been rekindled. I felt the familiar anger rise within me, the same anger I had felt as a child, but this time it was directed at both of them. I knew I had to confront Sarah again, but it couldn't be just about the affair. I had to expose the layers of deceit and manipulation. This was more than infidelity. It was a betrayal of trust that cut deeper than I had anticipated. I needed to make her understand the gravity of her actions and the pain they had caused me. The more I dug, the more I realized that Jake had likely been waiting for his moment to strike. He had always been drawn to power, and now, with Sarah, he had found an opportunity. I felt a cold determination settle in my chest. I would not be the victim anymore. I would take back my power, and I would make them both pay for their betrayal. As night fell and darkness enveloped the house, I sat in the dim light of my living room, plotting my next move. The weight of my emotions was heavy, but I felt a flicker of resolve igniting within me. I would not allow this to define me. I would rise from the ashes of my pain and take control of the narrative. The thought of revenge began to take shape in my mind, visions of how I would make them suffer swirling in a tempest of anger. I had been wronged, and I would ensure that they both felt the consequences of their actions. The following day felt like an eternity. I had barely slept, the weight of my thoughts pressing in on me like a vice. I spent the morning packing around the house, replaying every moment of my life with Sarah, every laugh, every whispered secret, and every promise we had made. Just the day before, I had been a husband filled with hope and dreams. Now, I was a man consumed by betrayal and a thirst for revenge. I decided to confront Sarah again, but this time it would be different. I would not let her deflect or manipulate the conversation. I needed clarity, and I needed her to face the truth of what she had done. I waited until evening, the setting sun casting long shadows in our living room, amplifying the tension in the air. When Sarah walked through the door, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She had been preparing for this moment, and I could sense her hesitation. "Hey," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "We need to talk." "About what?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "About you and Jake," I replied, keeping my voice calm, though inside I was a storm of emotions. "I know about the affair." Her face paled, and I could see the panic set in. "I told you it was a mistake." "I didn't mean for it to happen," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Stop," I interrupted, holding up my hand to silence her. "This isn't just a mistake, Sarah. This is a betrayal. You've been lying to me, and I deserve to know why." She looked down, her hands fidgeting nervously. "It was just a moment of weakness. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened." The words felt like daggers, and I couldn't help but scoff at her attempt to downplay the situation. A moment of weakness. "With Jake, do you even understand how that feels to me? This isn't just some random guy. This is the person who made my childhood a living hell. And now he's back in your life and you're sleeping with him." Tears welled in her eyes, and I felt a flicker of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it aside. "You think I wanted to betray you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You think I wanted any of this? It just happened." "Why him, Sarah? Why now?" I pressed, my voice rising as the anger bubbled to the surface. "What does he have that I do?" Hesitated, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He makes me feel alive. He was exciting, and Exciting?" I interrupted, incredulous. "You think being with a man who bullied me for years is exciting? You think that's what love is?" "I didn't think about it that way," she shot back, her frustration boiling over. I got caught up in the moment. It was stupid, and I regret it." "Regret doesn't fix this, Sarah," I shouted, the pain in my chest morphing into a fiery rage. "You don't just get to throw away everything we've built together for some thrill. You're playing with my heart, and I won't let you get away with it." "I'm sorry," she pleaded, her voice breaking as she stepped closer, reaching for my hand. But I pulled away, the distance between us feeling insurmountable. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said coldly. "You need to understand the consequences of your actions. You've hurt me in a way I can't even begin to describe." The tension in the room thickened as we stood in silence, both of us grappling with the weight of our reality. I could see the tears streaming down her face, but I felt nothing, only a cold, hard resolve. I had to take control of this situation to make her feel the pain I was experiencing. Just then the doorbell rang, cutting through the heavy atmosphere. I glanced at Sarah, her face paling as she realized who it might be. "Please don't answer it," she whispered, her voice trembling. But I was already moving toward the door, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and anticipation. I opened it to find Jake standing there, a cocky grin plastered across his face. He looked as if he owned the world, and in that moment I wanted nothing more than to wipe that smirk off his face. "What's up, man?" he said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Is Sarah around?" "Yes, she's here," I replied, my voice steady, masking the storm brewing inside me. "But you and I need to talk first." His grin faltered slightly, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Talk? About what?" "About you and my wife," I said, stepping aside to let him in. I could feel Sarah's presence behind me, her breath hitching in her throat as she realized the confrontation was about to escalate. Jake sauntered in, his confidence unwavering. "Look, I don't know what Sarah told you, but—" "Save it," I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "You think I'm going to let you waltz back into my life after everything you did to me? You think I'm going to let you take my wife?" His demeanor shifted, a hint of defensiveness creeping in. "It's not like that, man. Sarah and I—" "Stop right there," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to play the victim. You've always been a bully, and now you're trying to play the role of the charming guy. It doesn't work that way." Sarah stepped forward, desperation in her voice. "Please, let's not do this here. This isn't the time." "This is exactly the time," I snapped, my gaze locked on Jake. "You think you can just come back into our lives and pick up where you left off? You think you can have her after what you did to me?" Jake's bravado faltered, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Look, I didn't mean to hurt you, but nothing," I cut him off, stepping closer, my fists clenched at my sides. "You've already hurt me, and now you've hurt her. You think I'm going to let this slide? Maybe you should just let her go," he said, his voice shaky now. "If she wants to be with me." "No," I said firmly, my voice echoing in the room. "You don't get to decide that. I'm not going to let either of you off the hook so easily." The atmosphere crackled with tension, and for a moment we stood there, the three of us caught in a web of betrayal and anger. I could see the fear in Sarah's eyes, the realization that the consequences of her actions were now fully unfolding. "I'm done being the victim," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "I will make you both suffer for what you've done. You will feel the weight of your betrayal, and I won't stop until you do." As the words left my lips, I could see the panic settle over both Sarah and Jake. I had crossed a line, but I didn't care. I was no longer the scared kid who had cowered under Jake's bullying. I was a man ready to take back control, ready to unleash the fury of my past on both of them. The confrontation had only just begun, and I was determined to see it through to the end. After the confrontation, the air felt thick with unresolved tension. Sarah and Jake left, the door slamming shut behind them, echoing like the finality of a gunshot. I stood in the living room, adrenaline coursing through my veins, my mind racing. I had made a promise to myself. There would be consequences for their betrayal, and I would ensure they felt every ounce of pain they had inflicted on me. As night fell, I sat at my kitchen table, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. My laptop was open in front of me, and I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. I needed a plan, a way to execute my revenge that would not only hurt them but would also give me a sense of closure. I pulled out a notepad and began to jot down my thoughts. First, I needed to gather information. I had already seen how easily Jake had slipped back into Sarah's life. I had to dig deeper to uncover any weaknesses I could exploit. I started with social media. Jake was active on various platforms, posting about his life, his friends, and his ventures. I spent hours scrolling through his posts, looking for anything that could serve my purpose. That's when I found it, a photo of Jake at a bar with a group of friends, all of them laughing and drinking. The caption read, "Best night ever with the boys." But what caught my eye was the location tagged in the post, a bar that I knew was popular among our mutual friends. It was also a place where Sarah and I had shared many memories, a place we once called our spot. I felt a surge of anger as I realized how easily he had slipped back into the social fabric of my life. I could use this to my advantage. If I could expose their affair publicly, it would not only hurt them but also humiliate them. I could make them both feel the weight of their actions, the way I had felt when I discovered the truth. Next, I thought about how to approach Sarah. I needed to make her understand the depth of her betrayal, to show her that she couldn't just walk away from the consequences. I planned to confront her again, but this time, I would bring proof of her infidelity. I would make her face the reality of what she had done, to see how her actions had not only affected me but had also tarnished the love we once shared. As I mapped out my plan, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and even a twisted sense of excitement. This was the first time in years that I felt a sense of control over my life. The pain of betrayal had transformed into a cold, calculating determination. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of my revenge. The next day, I decided to head to the bar where Jake often hung out. I needed to get a sense of his routine, to see if there were any opportunities to catch him off guard. I arrived at the bar just as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the bustling crowd. I found a spot at the bar and ordered a drink, my eyes scanning the room for Jake. After a while, I spotted him at a corner table, surrounded by friends, laughter echoing through the air. He was animated, clearly enjoying himself, completely unaware of the storm brewing just outside his bubble. I felt a flicker of satisfaction at the thought of disrupting his little world. As I sat there, I overheard snippets of their conversation. They were discussing their latest adventures, boasting about their escapades. It made my blood boil. Did he have any idea how much pain he had caused? Did he even care? I made a mental note of the dynamics at play. Jake's friends were loyal, but they were also easily swayed. If I could plant the right seeds of doubt, I could turn them against him, making him the target of their ridicule. The thought brought a grim smile to my lips. With my plan solidifying in my mind, I returned home that night, feeling a sense of purpose. I would gather evidence of their affair and use it to expose them. I would ensure that their betrayal would not go unpunished. The next few days were a blur of planning and execution. I began to piece together the details of my revenge. I set up a fake social media account, one that would allow me to observe Jake and Sarah's interactions without raising suspicion. I watched their exchanges, their flirtations, and their secret rendezvous unfold in real time. Each message they exchanged felt like a dagger to my heart, fueling my resolve. I also started reaching out to some of our mutual friends. I carefully crafted conversations, planting subtle hints about Jake's past, his bullying, and the way he had treated me. I wanted to build a narrative to paint him as the villain he truly was. I could see the wheels turning in their minds as they began to question his character, to see him in a different light. As the days turned into weeks, I felt the weight of my plan solidifying. I was ready to execute my revenge, to bring both Sarah and Jake crashing down from their high horse. I envisioned the moment when they would realize the consequences of their actions, the moment when the truth would come crashing down around them. But as I prepared to put my plan into action, I felt a pang of doubt. Was I becoming the very thing I had despised? Was I sinking to Jake's level? The thought gnawed at me, a reminder of the boy I once was, the boy who had been bullied and humiliated. But then I remembered the pain they had caused me, the betrayal that had shattered my life. I pushed the doubts aside, reminding myself that this was about reclaiming my power. I was ready. The time for revenge had come. The day of reckoning had arrived. I woke up with a sense of purpose, my heart pounding with anticipation. I had spent weeks plotting this moment, and now everything was in place. I knew exactly what I needed to do, and I was determined to see it through. I began by gathering the evidence I had collected over the past few weeks. I had screenshots of messages between Sarah and Jake, revealing the depth of their affair. I made sure to highlight the most incriminating exchanges, the ones that would cut through any excuses they might try to use. I felt a cold satisfaction as I prepared the file, ready to present my case against them. That afternoon, I arranged to meet Sarah at the bar where Jake often hung out. It was a familiar setting for both of us, a place filled with memories that now felt tainted. I arrived early, taking a seat at a table where I could see the entrance. As I waited, my mind raced with thoughts of how I would confront her. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand the pain she had caused. When Sarah arrived, she looked apprehensive. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for signs of Jake. I could see the worry etched on her face, and it only fueled my resolve. I gestured for her to sit, and she hesitated before joining me. "Hey," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I wanted to talk about us, about what you did with Jake." Her expression shifted, a mix of guilt and defiance. "I told you it was a mistake. I never meant to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" I pressed, my voice steady. "Why him after everything?" "Because he made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time," she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was lost and he was there." "Lost?" I repeated incredulously. "You were lost in our marriage and you decided to run back to the guy who bullied me. That's your excuse." "I didn't think about it like that," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "It was just a moment of weakness. Can't you understand that?" "Understand?" "I don't think you even understand the gravity of what you've done." I shot back, my anger boiling beneath the surface. You've betrayed me with the very person who made my life a nightmare. I pulled out my phone, the evidence ready to be presented. I have proof of your affair, Sarah. I've seen the messages. I know everything. Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she might deny it. But then the realization hit her and she recoiled slightly, her breath catching in her throat. You have messages. Yes, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. And I will show them to everyone if you don't come clean about what's been happening. I will make sure everyone knows what you did. Please, she begged, her voice trembling. Don't do this. I'm sorry. I'll end it with him. Just don't expose me. I leaned in closer, my voice low and measured. You need to understand that this isn't just about you anymore. You made a choice and now you have to face the consequences. You can't just walk away from this. As I spoke, I could see the panic setting in on her face. I had her cornered and I could feel the power shifting in my favor. I want you to tell Jake you're done. I want you to break it off completely. If you don't, I will make sure everyone knows what you did. Sarah's eyes filled with tears and I felt a flicker of regret, but I quickly pushed it aside. This was necessary. She needed to learn that actions have consequences, and I was the one who would make sure she understood. I'll do it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll break it off. Just please don't hurt me. I nodded, satisfied with her response, but I wasn't done yet. There was still Jake to deal with, and I wanted him to feel the full force of my wrath. I knew where he would be that evening, back at the bar with his friends, reveling in his perceived victory. As the sun began to set, I made my way to the bar, my heart racing with anticipation. I entered, scanning the room until I spotted Jake in his usual spot, surrounded by his buddies, laughing and joking as if nothing was amiss. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I approached their table, a sense of purpose driving me forward. Jake, I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a knife. He turned to face me, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion. Hey man, what's up? He asked, trying to play it cool. I leaned in closer, my voice low but steady. We need to talk. His brow furrowed and I could see the tension in his posture. About what? About you and Sarah, I said, my words dripping with disdain. I know what you've been doing behind my back. The laughter around the table faded and I could feel the eyes of his friends on us, curiosity piqued. What are you talking about? He shot back, attempting to maintain his bravado. I have proof of your affair, I said, pulling out my phone once more, and I'm not afraid to show it to everyone here. The room fell silent and I could see the realization dawning on Jake's face. You're bluffing, he said, though there was a tremor in his voice. Am I? I challenged, scrolling through the messages I had saved, ensuring they were ready to be displayed. You think I'd let you get away with this? You think I'd just stand by and let you take what's mine? Jake's friends began to murmur among themselves, and I could see the doubt creeping into their expressions. I felt a surge of power as I prepared to unveil the truth. Look, man, it was just a fling. Jake tried to deflect, but I could see the cracks in his facade. I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to hurt me. I echoed, my voice rising. You've been tormenting me for years, and now you're trying to take my wife. You think this is just going to blow over? I raised my phone, ready to show everyone the evidence. This ends now, Jake. You're going to face the consequences of your actions, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could see Jake's bravado crumbling. You wouldn't do that, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. You can't just ruin my life. Just like you ruined mine. I shot back, my anger boiling over. You don't get to play the victim here. You made your choice, and now it's time to face the music. Before he could respond, I turned to the crowd that had gathered around us, their faces a mix of curiosity and shock. Everyone, I want you to see what kind of person Jake really is. This is the man who claims to be a friend, but behind the facade, he's a coward who preys on the vulnerable. With that, I revealed the messages, the proof of his betrayal laid bare for all to see. Gasps echoed through the bar as people began to read the incriminating texts. The laughter and camaraderie that had filled the room only moments before dissipated, replaced by a tense silence. Jake's face turned crimson as the reality of the situation sank in. I could see the shame wash over him, the humiliation of being exposed for the bully he truly was. His friends stared at him in disbelief, their expressions shifting from amusement to disgust. You're a joke, Jake, I said, my voice steady. You think you can just waltz back into my life and take what's mine. You're nothing but a coward hiding behind a facade. As the crowd began to murmur, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. I had taken back my power, and I had ensured that both Sarah and Jake would feel the consequences of their actions. The weight of betrayal that had once crushed me was now lifted, replaced by a sense of vindication. The bar erupted into whispers and gasps, and I could see the tide turning against Jake. He was no longer the charming bully. He was a man exposed, stripped of his bravado. I turned to leave, my heart racing with adrenaline, knowing that I had executed my plan flawlessly. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a wave, and I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. I had taken control of my life, and the scars of betrayal would no longer define me. I had fought back against my past, and I had emerged victorious. But as I walked away, I couldn't help but wonder what the aftermath would be. Would Sarah truly understand the pain she had caused? Would Jake face the consequences of his actions? As I contemplated the road ahead, I knew that my journey was far from over. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind. News of Jake's betrayal spread like wildfire through our social circle, igniting conversations and gossip that I had anticipated but never fully prepared for. I had exposed him, yes, but the fallout was more significant than I had imagined. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, some in support, others in disbelief. The mixed reactions only added to the chaos swirling in my mind. As for Sarah, the silence between us was deafening. I had given her a chance to come clean, to face the consequences of her actions, but I had no idea how she would react to the public humiliation I had unleashed on Jake. I imagined her sitting alone, grappling with the weight of her choices, and a part of me felt guilty for the pain I had caused. But that guilt was often overshadowed by the anger I still felt, anger at her betrayal, anger at Jake for tearing apart the life I had built. A week later, Sarah finally reached out. She asked to meet and I reluctantly agreed, my heart heavy with uncertainty. I chose a small cafe, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of our shared home looming over us. As I walked in, I spotted her sitting at a corner table, her expression a mix of apprehension and sorrow. "Hey," she said softly as I approached, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Hey," I replied, taking a seat across from her. The air was thick with tension and I could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "I'm sorry," she started, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry for what I did. I never wanted to hurt you." "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Sarah," I said, my tone firm. "You made a choice to betray me, you chose him over us." "I know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I was lost and I thought I was seeking something I had lost in our marriage, but I see now how foolish that was. I let my insecurities drive me to him and I hate myself for it." I listened as she spoke, the mix of regret and pain in her voice stirring something inside me. "But you need to understand," I continued, "this wasn't just a fling. You shattered my trust. You took something sacred and tossed it aside." "I know," she replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And I can't change what I did. I just wish I could take it all back." I felt a flicker of compassion, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memories of betrayal. "You can't erase the hurt, Sarah. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I want to try. I want to make this right. I want to fight for us if you'll let me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implications. I wanted to believe her, to think that we could somehow rebuild what was broken. But the reality of our situation loomed large, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that leap again. "I need time," I said finally, my voice steady. "I need to figure out what I want. This isn't something that can be fixed overnight." "I understand," she replied, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I'll give you all the time you need. Just know that I'm here and I'm willing to fight for us." As we parted ways, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me, anger, sadness, and a hint of hope. I had taken my revenge, and now I had to decide how to move forward. The choice was mine, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. In the following weeks, I focused on myself, taking time to reflect on my life, my choices, and the person I wanted to be. I reconnected with friends, sought support from those who had stood by me, and slowly began to heal. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, but I could feel the scars starting to fade. I also kept an eye on Jake, watching as he navigated the fallout from my revelations. The once cocky bully was now a pariah, shunned by many who once admired him. It was satisfying to see him face the consequences of his actions, but I wanted more than just his humiliation. I wanted him to understand the impact of his choices, the weight of the pain he had caused. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, so did my perspective. I realized that revenge had given me a sense of power, but it hadn't filled the void left by Sarah's betrayal. I needed to find a way to move on, to reclaim my life without being tethered to the pain of the past. Eventually, I reached out to Sarah again. We met at the same cafe, and this time I could see a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice steady. "About us, about what happened." "I've been thinking too," she replied, her expression earnest. "I know I can't erase the past, but I want to show you that I can be better. I want to earn your trust back." "I'm willing to give it a chance," I said, my heart racing. "But it's going to take time. I need to see that you're committed to making things right." "I will," she promised, her voice filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." As we began to rebuild our relationship, I felt a cautious optimism bloom within me. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to try. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to navigate it. In the end, I learned that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, didn't bring the closure I thought it would. Instead, it was the journey of healing and forgiveness that truly mattered. I had faced my past, confronted my demons, and emerged stronger for it. As I walked out of the cafe that day, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had taken back my power, not just through revenge, but by choosing to move forward. The scars of betrayal would always remain, but they were no longer a prison. They were a reminder of my resilience, my strength, and my ability to rise above the pain. I had fought for my life, and now I was ready to embrace whatever came next.